So I'm really excited to be with you all tonight to think about three types of writing inspired by art. And I'm going to invite you to do some writing tonight. I'm not going to put anybody on the spot to share their writing if you don't want to, but I would ask that if you haven't already, you might want to grab something to write with. And it's fine if you have a Google Doc open, if you want to write on your computer, but I know I like to kind of have a pencil and paper sometimes. So if you haven't already, take a moment and make sure you have something to write with. And I will tell you a little bit more about how our evening will be laid out. First, I wanted to give you just a quick bit of context about where I'm coming from, super brief, but so I'm at the Smithsonian American Art Museum, as Kamiko mentioned, which is part of the larger Smithsonian Institution, which you may or may not know is comprised of 21 museums and the National Zoo, as well as a number of research centers and libraries. We're mostly based in DC, although the Cooper Hewitt National Design Museum and one of our branches of the National Museum of the American Indian are in New York. We have a research center in Panama. So we're a little bit all over, but you can see here sort of a little snippet of some of the objects and buildings represented by all the museums, from the National Museum of African American History and Culture here in the top left, to the Natural History Museum, where you see the elephant here, the National Portrait Gallery, who we actually share a building with. You see the portrait of Barack Obama here, and many more. The National Zoo is always a favorite. You can see the cheetah here. I had to replace a picture of the pandas because they had to go back to China. I was very sad about it. Just to give you a sense of geographically where we are, our museum is actually just a few blocks north of the National Mall. And we share a building with the National Portrait Gallery. So there's two museums in one building. And here's just a little snapshot of some of our museum's galleries. To give you a sense, our collection has over 46,000 works of art. Of course, only a small percentage of that is on view in the museum at any given time. But the great thing is, as an educator, about 92% of those artworks are digitized and available online for you to access. And I'm going to share with you, I've created a collection on a platform called the Smithsonian Learning Lab with some sort of a curated selection, because 46,000 is a lot to look through, a curated selection of artworks that might work well as writing prompts for each of the types of writing that we're doing tonight. And our collection really spans from the colonial period up through the present day. We're still collecting contemporary art every year. And we have a wide variety of media, from painting to sculpture to photography, video, installation art, so a little bit of everything. All right. So I wanted to just give you a little outline and sense of where we're going tonight. So I've kind of broken this workshop up into 4 chapters, and we're going to spend about 20 minutes each, roughly, on each type of writing tonight. So we're going to start with some creative writing, move into narrative, and then do some argumentative writing, each with a different work of art. And then we'll wrap up with some discussion and reflection, kind of thinking about what our experience was like, practicing each of these types of writing inspired by art, and thinking about sort of the characteristics of artwork that work particularly well for each type of writing, and just do some thinking about classroom application. So that's the overview of where we're going. And I'm going to go ahead and dive into the first section, creative writing. And I'll just note that my slides are not yet on the Google Classroom, but I'm going to send those to Kamiko after this session. And so you'll have access to all of this. So no need to write down everything that I'm saying. All right. So we're going to start, as I said, with some creative writing. And we're going to look at this painting right here. And what I'm going to invite you to do in the chat in just a moment is start thinking about this artwork in terms of nouns, adjectives, and verbs. And we're going to start with nouns, which, as I'm sure you all know, are people, places, and things. And I'm going to ask you to start in the chat listing some nouns that you can find in this artwork. And I'm actually going to go out of my slideshow, if I can figure this out, and switch over to a Jamboard. And could you just let me know if you can't see? Everybody can see my Jamboard?
We can see it.
Okay,
Yep.
Thank you so much. All right, so I'm going to give you a moment to start listing nouns, and I see people are already doing that in the chat. And I'm going to take notes on this Jamboard with some of the things that are coming up the most. All right. Okay, so I'm seeing orange slice a lot. Orange. I see, let's see, I see a chess piece. I see a rose. Beautiful. All right, I see the Queen of Hearts. Oops. And oh, there's so many things coming in. Okay, I see a locket. Add that. And Kamiko or Elizabeth, please jump in if you're seeing things that I'm missing that are coming up a lot. There's so many great responses here. I see a pocket watch. I see, let's see. All right, I'm gonna add pocket watch. And I'm gonna add, let's see. So I'm seeing a number of people saying something like cosmetic jar, makeup, paint. Paint pot. Okay. I'm gonna say makeup. All right. So we've got, let's see, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 nouns here. I think that's a good start. And I know there are many more that I missed. Let's choose a few of these and start adding adjectives to describe them. And I know some people have already added beautiful adjectives in the chat. Oh, and I'm seeing so many good additional nouns coming in. I'm sorry to not be able to include them all. Okay, let's focus on one of these to start. So let's start with that orange. What is an adjective that you might use to describe that orange? Let's try to think of as descriptive words as possible. Ooh, these are fantastic. I'm seeing shiny, vibrant, zesty, delicious, juicy, wedge, aromatic, sweet, ripe, meaty, aromatic, cut or segmented, succulent. Excellent. Okay. Orange, absolutely. A noun and an adjective. Pithy. Beautiful. Is there one of those? Ooh, leftover. Interesting. Sexy. Is it a sexy orange? Okay. I'm going to add, I saw aromatic twice, so I'm going to put that one in. What about the chess piece? What words would we use to describe that chess piece? Solid, wooden, stilted, stoic, smooth. Power, manipulate, worn, fallen, majestic, marble, royal, subservient, thoughtful. Love this. We're getting really creative. Is there one of these that we've just read through that stands out the most to you? If you want to vote for one in the chat, you can re-record it down below. Got manipulative, stately, I think. Toppled. All right. I'm going to go with stately. So isolated, that's a good one too. All right. Let's do one more of the words, the nouns that we have left: rose, makeup, locket, queen of hearts, pocket watch. Which one is most interesting to you? If you want to vote for one of these in the chat. Okay. Couple votes for locket, couple votes for pocket watch. Okay, I've seen the most for the locket, so let's do that. And we'll keep these other ones in mind. What adjective would you use to describe the locket in this painting? Heirloom, revealing. I see precious, vintage, everlasting, open, divided. Early 80s. Pretty vintage, trusting, memorable. Tarnished. Interesting. Ooh, dual, nostalgic, keepsake, beloved. Nostalgic, vintage. These are great. Memorable. All right. Any votes for a particular word that stood out most to you? I saw memorable twice. I saw nostalgic twice. Okay, I've got another vote for nostalgic. Keepsake. Okay, we're going to go with nostalgic. Love it. Okay. Lots of votes, lots of love for nostalgic here. All right. And then we're going to finally move over to verbs. And here's where we're making a little bit of a conceptual leap. So I'm going to ask you, for each of the objects that we just looked at, what is that object doing in the artwork? So imagining that it's doing something, particular action. What is the orange doing? What action what word would you use to describe it? Ooh, I love it. The orange is enticing. It's inviting, gleaming, waiting, balancing, tempting, toppling, glaring and glistening, aging. Interesting. Orange is tickling my memories. Love that. Seducing. Beautiful. Glistening, shining. Running, tempting, running out of time, alive or vibrant. All right, is there one of those words that anybody wants to vote for to record here? Controlling. I saw glistening a couple times. I saw tempting a couple times. Okay, got a couple of votes for tempting, so I'm going to put that in. All right, what about that chess piece, that stately chess piece? What is it doing in this artwork? Okay, we've got guarding, winning, domineering, love it. Waiting, covering, grieving, guarding, losing, defending, strategizing, observing. These are so interesting. Devising. Okay. Towering, waiting. All right, I've seen waiting a few times. Is there anything else that anybody wants to advocate for to record up here? Plotting, remaining unplayed. Sarah's got a list. Lying, posing, reposting, waiting, focusing, pondering, plotting. Ooh, a couple votes for plotting. I like that. We're gonna go with plotting. I also like waiting. All right, let's do one more. The locket, the nostalgic locket. What is it doing in this artwork? Remembering, flaunting. Let's see. Ooh, coming in fast. Okay. Crying, drawing us in, juxtaposing, hiding, mourning, reminding, connecting, rendering, laughing, reminiscing. These are so good. Another grieving, conjuring, ooh, capturing, adoring, remembering, teasing, enlightening, speculating. Beautiful. Okay. Was there anyone, as you scroll back and look through the verbs that we just heard, is there one that stands out to you? Any particular votes? Got reminiscing, conjuring. Okay. We've got equal love for both, unless anybody wants to put in a last. Yes, okay. I'm seeing reminiscing the most. I'm gonna put that down. Oh, hindering is good too. All right, so just going to read through these sentences that we created together. So the aromatic orange is tempting. The stately chess piece is plotting. And the nostalgic locket is reminiscing. Excellent. I'm going to take us back to the slideshow. And here's where I'm going to invite you to do some individual writing. So no need to put anything in the chat right away, although I will invite you to share a bit if you'd like to. But we've explored this artwork. This is sort of a still life through the objects. And I'd like you now to imagine that this still life is the portrait of a character. So I'm going to give you a few minutes to write just a few sentences, a short paragraph maybe, writing an introduction to who this character is. And think about the object that we looked at, and maybe the ones that we didn't talk about as well. And your challenge in your writing is to use at least one of these objects as a simile or a metaphor to tell us something about who your character is. So an example of that might be, she was as deadly in the courtroom as the queen on a chessboard. So imagine, think about which of these objects is speaking to you and evoking some meaning to you. And take just 3 or 4 minutes, which I know is not a lot of time, to write a few sentences. Again, this is not in the chat, this is on your own, creating this character sketch, and think about which object you'll use as a simile or metaphor. So we'll come back together in 3 or 4 minutes. Take about 1 more minute and see if you can add a sentence or two to your description of your character. All right, so when you're ready, if you would like, I would love to see in the chat just a sentence or a phrase from your writing that maybe it's the simile or metaphor that you wrote, or just a favorite line from the piece of writing you just did. Totally optional, but if you would like to pop a bit of your writing in the chat, I would love to see. I'll give you just a moment. Ooh, thank you, Emily, for getting us started. That's beautiful. Very evocative. Thank you, Kelsey. Love that. Keeper like a pocket watch. It's a keeper of time. Thank you, Ashley. Nice. Marguerite. That's great. Ooh, Jay, the snake of nostalgia. These are awesome. Please continue to share if you would like. I'm enjoying reading all of these. It's interesting. I think most of our characters are female so far. It's interesting that that's the way we went. So again, I'm going to share with you a collection that will have all the artworks that we looked at tonight, so you'll have access to more information about this. But I'll just share with you, this is a painting by the artist Audrey Flack, and the title is Queen. So you can see a few references to that idea of a queen throughout this artwork. Keep sharing your beautiful writing. This is great. Thank you. For the sake of time, I'm going to move us on to our next section. And we're going to shift a little bit from creative to narrative writing. And I'm going to start by giving us a chance to do some close looking at this artwork before we jump into doing any writing. So this is a thinking routine that you may or may not be familiar with. I use a lot of routines from Harvard's Project Zero, and See, Think, Wonders is a great sort of introductory looking routine that works with students of all ages. So I'm going to invite you to start with thinking about just what do you see in this artwork? And I literally mean like, what are some things that you can point to? And please share in the chat anything that you see. Emily sees flatness. Interesting. Be thinking about the artist's style. Jenna sees a full moon. Ashley sees tiny flowers. Cynthia sees religion. Interesting. Kendall sees light. Got three figures, a cross on the wall, the sky. Friends gazing distantly. Youth versus parents. Interesting. We see a mother working. Daffodils in the flower bed, the daily chores inside, and the dreams and awe outside. Nice. Okay, so we're already starting to get into interpretation a little bit, which is okay. But I'm going to move us more purposefully now into that second question. What do you think about what you see? What do you think might be going on here? What do you think this might be about? You've already kind of got this idea that there's split between generations, the youth and maybe the parent or parental figure. Marguerite's thinking about bedtime routines. Jenna's thinking about hoped dreams versus reality. Interesting. The tireless, endless labor of a mother. Containment and freedom, monotony and possibility. Vivid imagination of children versus the eternal toil of a single mother. Chores, order, and religion inside, wonder and dreams of possibilities outside. Okay. Juxtaposition of dreams and reality. Sisters dreaming of a future of greatness, mother is working in reality. Okay. Interesting. We're already sort of crafting a narrative here. An ability to dream supported by the safety of home underneath. So maybe it's not just a contrast, maybe it's that one makes the other possible. Emily's thinking about the styles of the way this is painted feels like a paper puppet show. So I think I see a story passed down. Interesting. Okay, so I'm going to move us into that third question that sort of invites curiosity. What does this painting make you wonder? What are you curious about? What questions arise for you? What secrets are they sharing on the roof? Good question. How did they get up there? Yeah, maybe they climbed that tree. Who knows? Does the mother know the kids are on the roof? Good question. Does the parent support the children's dreams? What do they know that I do not? What's the intent of depicting the scene in this way? Thinking about the artist's intent there. Do we lose the ability to dream as we're drawn inside to the mundane tasks of living life? What inspired the spontaneity to climb up on the roof? What did the artist go through to get this idea, or is it a memory? Interesting. What is the mother smiling about? What's the relationship between the figures? Why use the cross as decoration? Would the mother want to be with the children on the roof? These are fantastic questions. I love this. Okay, so we're thinking about narrative, right? So this diagram is probably somewhat familiar to many of you, but just to think about narrative structure for a moment. If we're simplifying narrative structure, we can kind of think about it in terms of beginning, middle, and end. Where at the beginning we're maybe introducing the characters and the setting, and maybe there's some inciting incident or something to get the plot going, and the action starts rising towards this climax that happens somewhere towards the middle or toward maybe middle to end, and then the end of a story is where we kind of get some resolution, there's falling action, and things kind of come to a close. So what happens if we think about this artwork and that we just looked at and putting that on this this narrative structure of chart? So what if we imagine that this painting is the beginning of a story? What might this painting be setting up? that would happen later in the story? What might happen in the middle? What might happen at the end? So I'm gonna give you a couple minutes just to write, again, independently. It doesn't have to be in the chat. Emily, werewolf attack for sure. That's quite a story. So imagining that this is, again, the beginning of the story, just free write for a couple of minutes about what is happening here and then what might happen in the middle and at the end of this story. And again, I'll give you the opportunity to share a little bit in the chat if you'd like to afterward, but just take a couple minutes for yourself. Yes, Emily, I'll go back to the larger version. Thank you for asking. Think about one more minute. I know isn't a lot of time, but this is sort of a mini writing exercise. All right. So we just imagined that this painting was at the beginning of a story. I'm now going to invite you to imagine what happens if this is a scene from the middle of a story. What might have happened before this moment to get us to this point? Is this the climax of a story? Is it part of that rising action? And then again, what might happen afterward? How might this story conclude? So I'm going to give you a couple more minutes to jot down some just free writing ideas about what happens when this is the middle of the story. And I'll go back to the large version. Oops, sorry. Jay, thank you for sharing. No, that's great. If anybody else wants to share any piece of their writing in the chat, you are welcome to do so. Take another minute or so, writing about this artwork as the middle of a story. And we've got a couple of fantastic examples of writing from the beginning writing exercise. And if anybody else would like to share an excerpt from your writing or just a sentence or a phrase, either from the beginning, imagining this is the beginning of the story, or the middle, please, I would love to see more. So you're welcome to share. I'll give you just another minute or so to wrap up your writing or share anything in the chat that you'd like to. These are fantastic, and it's making me want to read the full stories that you're starting to write here. Please continue to share. But we, of course, could continue this and think about this painting as the end of a story. For the sake of time, I'm not going to have us write about that right now. But I do want to ask you to think about sort of this process of imagining this artwork at different points in a story. And I'll just invite your reflection in the chat, or if anybody would like to unmute, this would be a fine time to do that. But what did this process of moving the same scene to different points in time do for your thinking about narrative structure, or writing a story? How is that exercise for you? And I'll just open it up to any reflections, again, in the chat, or if anyone would like to unmute.
I think it's like super important for the kids to see something like this where they can orient themselves and have some sort of idea where they're supposed to go. Like, you know, where they develop expectations and know, okay, if I want to write towards a particular genre, like a short story, I have to have some particular element that includes science fiction. It'll begin some way. If it's the horror, it'll begin another way. So I think it's really cool to see that kind of connection, and not just a short story. Maybe this could become a poem and have a narrative structure to it. So that is really interesting to see the possibilities of this.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Jay. I love that point too about thinking about genre and how the story might look different depending on what genre we're putting it into. So thank you. Yeah, and Kathleen, I agree with your comment there about how the story was so different when you thought about it at a different point in time. Any other thoughts before we move on? Cynthia, that's awesome that you taught this in class today. Perfect timing.
Also, the visuals and the way everyone is sharing with each other would be wonderful for emergent bilinguals, you know, with that language development. So I think that would be a great activity for that as well.
Absolutely. Thank you for pointing that out. That's great. Yeah, and some great other comments in the chat from Emily and Kelsey. Yeah, you don't always have to start at the beginning. It can be hard to picture the story. Awesome. Yes. So I love this piece for thinking about narrative. And I'll share with you some other options that might work well for narrative writing, but this piece is actually by a Texas artist, Carmen Lomas Garza. You may be familiar with her work because you may be familiar with her work as an artist whose work is in museums, but she's also an illustrator of children's books. So her work just naturally really lends itself to storytelling and narrative structure. And this piece in our collection, I absolutely love, and it's called Camas para Sueños, or Beds for Dreams. It's one of my favorites. So I am going to move us now into our last bit of writing. And now we're going to think about argumentative writing, or you could also think of it as persuasive writing. So we've got a third artwork here, and I'm going to use another Project Zero thinking routine to have us kind of unpack this one together. And this routine is called Claim, Support, Question. So I'd like to give you all a moment to look closely at what's going on in the artwork here on the screen. And when you're ready, I'd like for you to make a claim about this artwork in the chat. So this could be a claim about something that you think is going on in the artwork. It could be a claim about something the artist is trying to tell us. It can be anything big or small, but think about what claim you might make. And I'll give you a moment to look and to share your claim in the chat. Ooh. Thank you, Jenna, for getting us started. She doesn't need a hero. She's not impressed by the men who come to visit her. She is her own hero. This piece reflects the idea that anonymity gives power to identity. And women are not allowed to study. Interesting. Such a range of claims we have here. Ashley's saying she is annoyed that she will have to remind him that capes are a bad idea since his last one has gotten caught once again on the porch. People can be barriers as much as walls. Interesting. One can be contemplative in one's culture, but the world can endanger. She's dreaming up her own idea for heroes. The woman is thinking about the superhero in the story she's about to write. Interesting. Self-empowerment begins with not being afraid of being alone. People daydream about superheroes, imagining that they are too common to be one, though the superhero is within them all along. Ooh, these are good claims. Okay. So I love these. I'm going to try to look back through these, and even women can follow in Stanley's footsteps. Nice. Okay. So the next piece of this is support, right? So here's where we're looking for visual support for our claim. So I would love for you to either choose a claim that somebody wrote above in the chat, or if you had your own claim, would you please in the chat identify a piece of visual support for that claim? So you might say, you know, if you're responding to the claim, she is her own hero. Write that in the chat and then tell us what's one piece of visual evidence that supports that claim. So I'll give you a moment to find that support and add it in the chat. Okay. And if you can tell us which claim you're responding to, that would be helpful as well. Okay, so I'm seeing some good examples here. So, for example, Emily is saying this piece reflects the idea that anonymity gives power to identity. This is shown by the woman whose identity is revealed at a lower position physically than the unknown figure who stands above confidently. Nice. Cynthia is another example. She's her own hero. After completing her reading, her book, her expression is blank. Meanwhile, there's a silhouette of a masculine figure with a flowing cape. Nice. Like that one. Is it Jonna or John? I'm not sure. She's not impressed by the men who come to see her. Her facial expression and posture seem bored, while the stance of the person outside is a powerful in-charge stance of someone used to being respected. Okay, nice. So I love how we're pulling out visual details here and using them to support our claims. Third piece of this, what questions do you have about this artwork? And, you know, maybe in relation to one of the claims that we talked about, is there something that's confusing to you or contradictory? What questions do we have? You can add those to the chat as well. Okay, Cynthia's asking, is she contemplating getting up and confronting the man? And Marguerite is wondering, is the superhero figure real or imagined? Ooh, interesting. Kathleen's wondering, why doesn't the man just come to the open doorway rather than intimidate us behind the screen? Excellent question. Okay. Beautiful. So I'm going to share a little bit more information about this piece with us now, with the group. How does Western standards challenge Asian empowerment, culture? Who just stands around like a superhero? Why is the book drawn closed? Has she made no move to create her hero? Excellent questions. Okay, so like I said, I'm going to share a little bit more context with you with this piece. And we're going to use that to sort of extend our thinking. So this painting is by an artist named Roger Shimomura. It was painted in 1980. And the title of the painting is Diary, December 12th, 1941. So just with that little bit of information, does that title spark any thinking for you? We've got this very specific date in the title. Okay, yeah, so Emily is making a connection to World War II. This is definitely World War II era, although the painting itself was made 4 decades later. Yeah, a lot going on with this title. Any specific associations with that date? Yeah, okay, Tiffany and Kathy are there. So the bombing of Pearl Harbor was December 7th, 1941. So this is 5 days after that. So this painting is part of a series that the artist Roger Shimomura, who you see there, created based on the diary entries of his grandmother. His grandmother, Toku Shimomura, was born in Japan, and she immigrated to Seattle, where she raised a family with her husband, and she was living there when Pearl Harbor was bombed on December 7th, 1941. And along with, thousands of other people of Japanese descent living on the West Coast at that time, she and her family were forcibly removed and taken to internment camps to live for the duration of the war. And the artist, Roger Shimomura, he was 3 years old when his family was moved to Minidoka, which is in Idaho, and that's where they remained for the duration of the war. So as an adult artist, he was able to go back and find these diary entries that his grandmother created, and translate them from Japanese into English. And he created this series of paintings based on specific entries. So I'm going to read for you the English translation of the diary entry that this painting is based on from December 12th. So it says, I spent all day at home. Starting from today, we were permitted to withdraw $100 from the bank. This was for our sustenance of life, we who are enemy to them. I deeply felt America's large-heartedness in dealing with us. So again, this was 5 days after the bombing of Pearl Harbor. So the family had not yet been moved to an internment camp, but the bank accounts of Japanese Americans had been frozen. So that's what she's referring to when she talks about being allowed to withdraw $100 from the bank. So that's a lot of context, but I want to just invite you to kind of go back to our initial thinking about this piece and some of the things that we noticed and some of the claims we started to make. How does this context connect to your initial thinking or extend it in new ways? And Kathy, that's a great question. I have about where the diary entries can be found. I have a collection on the Smithsonian Learning Lab that reproduces a number of those diary entries, and I can share that as a supporting resource for the Google Classroom, so you can access them. Great. Okay, so Jenna's saying, I feel like my claim was based in feminism. Interesting. So Jenna, do you still feel like that interpretation is valid, or does the context change the way that you're thinking about it? And Jay, the question was basically, now that you've learned a little bit more about the context that this piece was made in, the historical context, how does that connect to or extend your thinking about this painting? Okay. Okay, thanks, Jenna. So you're saying it's...
Sorry, can you hear me?
Yes, I can.
Okay, sorry, I was trying to get it on the mic. At first I was trying to type it out, but I feel like it's more about American ego, because it's showing because saying like, I'm allowing you to eat this food or to have money to feed your family or to do the things, and then him being in this, you know, a strong big superhero in the stereotypical Superman pose as a very iconic American character, that's showing like the ego and power of America. And hey, sorry, my kids are in the car. It's showing all of that power and just kind of essentially the ego that of we're the bosses, we're the ones who saved, you know, saved everybody, but yet instantly American citizens who were of Japanese heritage were in internment camps, you know, so like it's kind of, I don't know, I feel like it's broadcasting that ego.
Yeah, thank you so much for sharing that thinking. That's great. And I'm seeing a lot more great comments in the chat. Kathy, that idea is the superhero might represent power. It's fantastic. Yes, I can share the last line of the diary entry again. The last line was, I deeply felt America's large-heartedness in dealing with us. So which always makes me wonder, you know, is that really how she felt, that it was large-hearted of the government to allow them to take out $100, or was there kind of a sarcasm in there, or is that something that, you know, the artist, her grandson, looking back 40 years later, is seeing in a different light than she was seeing it at the time? And I always connect that to this Superman figure, this idea of the large-hearted American. Super interesting painting. There's no one correct interpretation of this painting. So I think it's a really interesting one to think about argument. So the last little piece of writing I'm going to invite you to do is think about transforming your claim, one of your claims that you made earlier, or writing a new claim and turning that into a thesis statement. So a particular argument that you could back up and defend in a longer essay, perhaps. So write your thesis statement and then think about what 3 pieces of evidence, or even if it's just 1 or 2 right now, what pieces of evidence, either visual evidence or evidence maybe from the diary entry or the title or any of the context that we shared, what would you use to convince a reader that your thesis is true or correct? So I'm going to give you a few minutes, maybe 4 minutes or so, which I know is not enough time, but just to draft a thesis statement and then think about your evidence. And again, you can do this on your own, and then I'll invite you to share if you'd like to in the chat. About 2 more minutes. And try to make sure you have a thesis statement and at least 1 or 2 pieces of evidence. And I think some people are already starting to do this, but I just want to invite everyone, if you'd like to share your thesis statement in the chat, or if you want to share the thesis and any piece of evidence that you see in the artwork, or in the context, you can add that into the chat. I'd love to see sort of the range of statements that we have. And there's an interesting conversation happening about the clothing in this painting and sort of this more traditional kimono and traditionally Japanese clothing, and whether that would be accurate at the time. It's an interesting question. It's something that, you know, the artist is kind of playing with a couple of different styles of art. He's referencing sort of traditional Japanese painting and sort of some of the iconography of women that you might see in those paintings. And he's also sort of adopting this comic book style with sort of the flat panes of color, and of course the reference to Superman. So I don't know that this is necessarily how his grandmother dressed. I think he's being a little bit more imaginative here, and maybe referencing images from art history, as well as sort of these comic book tropes. So I know that's not a definitive answer, but just to give you a little bit more to think about there. All right. So if anyone else would like to share your thesis statement in the chat, please take a moment to drop it in there. Thank you, Marguerite. Thinking about sort of the superhero as representing the government, like that. Thank you, Andrea. Very interesting. All right. And I love that we're sort of having a little bit of a debate, thinking about some of these ideas, which is, I think, evidence for this piece is a good one for argumentative writing. Thinking about the idea of American ego versus fear. Really interesting. Okay, please keep it coming. I'd love to read more of these. I want to make sure we have time for discussion before we end. So I'm going to sort of move us into this last chapter here. And before I give you a chance to reflect about your experience, I just wanted to share, kind of based on the teachers that I've worked with in the past and conversations I've had, here are a few things that have come up frequently about sort of the value of using art in the classroom, outside of the art classroom. So some of the things that came up, that have come up a lot, are the idea that art can sort of even the playing field for students with different levels of knowledge and ability. That, you know, as long as you can see and make observations, you can participate and you can contribute. I've often found that art is a good way to invite students to connect to emotion and empathy in the classroom, as well as connecting to content. So it's not separate, but it's happening at the same time. We tend to see high levels of student engagement, often from students who don't typically participate as much. Art can be a way to engage those more hesitant students in conversation. Art, as we talked about, there's not always one obviously correct interpretation or reading of a painting. So it's a way for multiple perspectives and interpretations to be seen as valid. And as long as students can offer evidence for their claims, that's a valid interpretation. And then this idea of transferable skills like observation, analysis, inferencing, all these things that you all were doing when you're analyzing an artwork are also incredibly useful skills when you're analyzing a literary text, when you're analyzing a primary document in a history classroom. So there's a lot of valuable skill building here. And maybe there are additional things that you would add to that list. I want to just open it up for reflection in these last few minutes. And the first question I have is, what role did the artwork play for you as a writing prompt in this experience? How did the artwork invite you into the writing process or spark thinking? And again, feel free to respond in the chat, or if you'd like to unmute, you're welcome to do so. I love that idea, Ashley. Thank you. Sarah, I hear your comment there about that sort of the pressure to prepare for a test or an evaluation. Yeah, but I think going back to that idea of like transferability, there are so many valuable skills being built here that are useful on tests that I would argue that this is really important, rigorous work. Lots of great thinking here. I like that phrasing, Marguerite, both catalyst and frame, to keep your thoughts within a boundary. I'm seeing thinking, creativity, emotion, engagement, building joy in writing, critical thinking. Nice. Beautiful. I want to ask a second question, thinking about the selection of artworks, because that's often something I hear as sort of a concern from teachers or a challenge in finding the right artwork to use in the classroom, and in this case for a writing prompt. So what did you respond to in one or more of these artworks, and what qualities might you look for in an artwork that might work well as a writing prompt? Any thoughts about that in the chat or aloud?
Hi, Sarah here. I think for me, the qualities that I would look for in an artwork to use as a writing prompt is one, a variety of concepts that the students can latch onto, like your first one, where it had a whole hullabaloo of different items that you could pull from, and you could pull in one or you could pull in multiple. I love that concept, especially as, say, a bell ringer that they could come in and start whenever they first come in, or with the second piece, using it as a way to teach the linear concept of storytelling. I really, really appreciated that.
Awesome. Thank you. Thanks for those thoughts.
I think also, and I was just mentioning, I just love this with the Texas Humanities workshops, like seeing it modeled. I'm kind of understand, like, I don't have to be an expert with the piece of art. And ideally I would have more thinking time than we had today to just, I can also learn through the process with the piece of art with the students. So that was kind of good to see, just, you know, coming from all point of views, that I don't have to be skilled on the piece of art. You know, sometimes I don't have the confidence because I'm like, I don't know everything about this piece, but just how this kind of flowed, I feel like I can do the same with my students.
That's great. Thank you so much. Yeah, and that's really true. Like, besides that last artwork where I gave a little bit of context, I was really acting more as a facilitator, asking questions, prompting your looking and your thinking. So you don't need to be an art history expert to use art successfully in the classroom. And fantastic thoughts in the chat as well. I want to make sure I share with you before we wrap up. This is on the Google Classroom for this workshop, but I created, as I mentioned, this collection on the Smithsonian Learning Lab, which is a Smithsonian platform where you can create your own collections of resources. So I've, you just see a little bit of it here, but I've pre-selected some artworks from our collection that I think would work really well for each type of art, each type of writing that we did today. So it's broken down into creative, narrative, and argumentative. Those are meant as suggestions, but these categories are really fluid, and there might be an artwork that, you know, you find in the creative writing section that would work beautifully for argumentative writing. So don't feel constrained by those categories. But I wanted to make sure you had a chance to see some additional artworks. I know from your surveys that you completed before attending the workshop that you were interested in lots of suggestions and resources. So I wanted to provide you a wider range of options. And then some of the prompts and thinking routines are in the collection as well. And then I just wanted to thank you for your time and share my email with you. You're more than welcome to reach out to me if you have any questions or you know, you're interested in learning more about using art in your teaching. So please reach out to me if you would like. And